My mother's face when I finally told her the truth was worth every criticism I'd endured for 15 years. Too impulsive, too creative, too distracted. Those were her favorite words to describe me at family gatherings. I'm Sophia Reeves, 36, founder of Luminary Innovations with a valuation that hit $40 million last quarter. But to my family, I was just the disappointing daughter who abandoned the prestigious Reeves Consulting Group to chase silly dreams. Funny how success can suddenly transform you from family embarrassment to family genius overnight. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Reeves name meant something in Boston's financial district. For 3 generations, my family had built Reeves Consulting Group into one of the most respected wealth management firms in New England. Our offices occupied the 15th floor of a gleaming downtown high-rise with views of the harbor, and our client list included old money families whose ancestors had arrived on the Mayflower. My grandfather, Harold Reeves, had founded the company in 1962 with nothing but determination and an uncanny ability to predict market shifts. My father, William Reeves, had expanded it through the technological revolution of the 90s, adding specialized services for tech executives and entrepreneurs. The company logo, a lighthouse guiding ships through stormy seas, had become synonymous with stability and tradition. From my earliest memories, it was made clear that Reeves Consulting was our legacy, our purpose, our family's contribution to the world. Dinner conversations revolved around market trends and client acquisitions. Summer vacations were scheduled around financial conferences. Even Christmas gatherings inevitably turned into impromptu board meetings once the dessert plates had been cleared away. I have 2 siblings. My older brother James embraced the family legacy without hesitation. 5 years my senior, he graduated from Harvard Business School with honors and joined the firm immediately afterward, working his way through departments with methodical precision. My younger sister, Elizabeth, followed a similar path 3 years after me, though she specialized in tax law rather than financial planning. Both fit perfectly into the Reeves mold: analytical, conservative, impeccably dressed, and always prepared with a firm handshake and a rehearsed smile. Then there was me. From childhood, I was the family anomaly. Where my siblings excelled at mathematics and economics, I lost myself in art and literature. While they built financial models and analyzed market reports for fun, I designed elaborate inventions and created business ideas that made my father chuckle dismissively. "Creative, that one," he would say to colleagues, the word sounding more like a diagnosis than a compliment. My mother, Victoria Reeves, found my tendencies particularly troubling. A former investment banker who had given up her career to support my father's, she had dedicated herself to grooming her children for success. James and Elizabeth had proven receptive to her careful molding. I remained stubbornly resistant. "Sophia, please pay attention," she would say during the family's Sunday finance lessons, when my father would gather us in his home office to explain concepts like compound interest and risk assessment. "This will be your future someday." But even as a 12-year-old, I questioned everything. Why do we only focus on managing wealth that already exists? Wouldn't it be more interesting to create new wealth by inventing something or solving a problem? The questions earned me exasperated sighs and concerned glances between my parents. My perspective wasn't just different, it was threatening to the carefully constructed family narrative. Despite their concerns, I performed well academically, earning my way into Boston University's business program. It wasn't Harvard or Yale. Like my siblings, a fact my mother never failed to mention at family gatherings, but it was a respected school. And importantly, it gave me some distance from the family shadow while keeping me close enough to attend the mandatory Sunday dinners at my parents' Beacon Hill brownstone. College revealed a world beyond the narrow confines of wealth management. I discovered entrepreneurship classes, design thinking workshops, and innovation competitions. I found myself drawn to startups and their energy, the way they questioned, established systems, and created new solutions. For the first time, I felt like my mind's constant generation of ideas wasn't a liability, but an asset. My junior year, I took an entrepreneurship class that changed everything. The professor, Dr. Miranda Chen, approached business not as a means of preserving wealth, but as a vehicle for transformation. The best entrepreneurs, she told us, don't just see the world as it is, they see it as it could be. Under her mentorship, I developed my first serious business concept, a platform connecting small local businesses with freelance marketing professionals. The idea won the university's innovation competition and caught the attention of a small angel investor who offered $25,000 in seed funding. When I called home with the news, expecting at least grudging approval, my mother's response deflated my excitement instantly. "Sophia, that's a nice school project, but it's time to focus on your real future. Your father has arranged an internship for you at Reeves for this summer. Mr. Donovan will be mentoring you personally." I tried to explain that this wasn't just a school project. It was an actual business opportunity with real funding. But she had already moved on to discussing Elizabeth's exceptional performance in her corporate tax law course. Against my parents' wishes, I turned down the internship at Reeves and spent the summer launching my platform. The business showed promise, connecting over 30 small businesses with marketing freelancers in its first 3 months. But without additional funding or experienced guidance, it struggled to scale and eventually folded just after my graduation. A valuable lesson, my father said when I finally admitted the failure. Innovation is risky. Stability is what we offer at Reeves. Now you can join us with that experiment out of your system. Reluctantly, I accepted a position at the family firm. My role was carefully contained, junior associate in the client relations department, where I would have minimal opportunity to suggest changes or influence strategy. My desk was positioned in a windowless interior office that employees jokingly called the vault due to its isolation and lack of natural light. From day one, it was clear that my presence was tolerated rather than welcomed. My ideas for modernizing our client approach or incorporating emerging financial technologies were consistently dismissed. "That's not how we do things at Reeves," became the refrain I heard in meeting after meeting. The atmosphere was particularly tense during quarterly family business dinners, when my parents, siblings, and key executives gathered to discuss the firm's direction. At one memorable occasion 6 months after I joined, my mother explicitly addressed my integration issues. "Sophia continues to struggle with the Reeves approach," she announced to the table as I sat silently cutting my steak. Her supervisor reports that she frequently questions established protocols and makes suggestions that demonstrate a fundamental misunderstanding of our client relationships. My supervisor, a 50-something man who had worked for my father for 20 years, nodded in agreement. "She has creative instincts, but they're not always appropriate for our business model." "Perhaps we need to reconsider her department placement," my brother James suggested. As the heir apparent, his words carried significant weight despite his only being 5 years my senior. "Client relations requires a certain temperament." "I was thinking the same," my father agreed. "The records department might be more suitable. Fewer client interactions, more structured processes." They discussed my career as if I weren't sitting at the table, as if I were a troublesome inventory item being reassigned to a different warehouse section. My sister Elizabeth gave me a sympathetic glance but remained silent. She had learned early that alignment with the family consensus was the path to approval. That night marked a turning point. After dinner, I walked alone through Boston. Common, watching families enjoy the early summer evening. Children running with ice cream cones, couples walking hand in hand. Everyone seemed connected to something meaningful, to people they loved, to activities that brought them joy. I realized that I had no such connection to Reeves Consulting. Despite the family name on the door, despite the presumed birthright, I felt like an imposter every time I walked into those offices. Worse, I was becoming someone I didn't recognize, someone who suppressed ideas rather than expressing them, who walked on eggshells rather than with confidence. 2 weeks later, I submitted my resignation. I didn't make a dramatic announcement or try to justify my decision to the family. I simply completed the HR paperwork, cleared my desk on a Friday afternoon, and left my building access card with security. When I didn't appear at the Sunday family dinner that weekend, my mother called, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Your father received your resignation letter. Is this some kind of negotiation tactic?" "No, Mom. I'm really leaving. Reeves isn't the right place for me." "And what exactly do you plan to do instead? Another one of your experimental businesses that collapses within months?" The dismissal in her tone ignited something in me. Not anger, but determination. "I don't know exactly what's next," I admitted. "But I know it's not pretending to be someone I'm not just to maintain family appearances. This is about responsibility. Sophia, not appearances. Your father built this company for his children. James and Elizabeth understand that. Only you seem determined to reject your heritage and obligations. I'm not rejecting anything. I'm choosing a different path." "A path to what? Instability? Financial struggle? Do you understand what you're giving up? The security? The connections? The respect that comes with the Reeves name?" I took a deep breath. I understand exactly what I'm giving up, and I'm still making this choice. There was a long pause before my mother spoke again, her voice now cold and formal. "I see. Well, I'll inform the family of your decision. I assume you'll need some time before joining us for gatherings. This will be quite disappointing for your grandparents." The subtle manipulation, the implied family disapproval, the suggestion of shame, was familiar territory. This time, however, it didn't trigger my usual desire to placate. "I'm still family, Mom. I'm just not an employee anymore." Those have always been inseparable in this household, Sophia. You know that. After hanging up, I sat in my apartment, a modest one-bedroom I'd chosen specifically for its affordability on my junior associate salary, and felt a complex mixture of terror and exhilaration. I had just walked away from guaranteed wealth, status, and family approval. By conventional standards, it was professional suicide. Yet underlying the uncertainty was a profound sense of liberation. For the first time since childhood, my path was truly my own to determine. The next morning, I began systematically planning my next steps. Unlike my previous post-college venture, I wouldn't rush into execution without proper research and strategy. I had learned valuable lessons from that failure, lessons about market validation, sustainable business models, and the importance of building the right team. I had modest savings, about $30,000 I'd managed to set aside from my Reeves salary, by living frugally. It wasn't enough to launch a major venture, but it would sustain me while I developed my concept and sought initial funding. The idea had been percolating for years, born from observing a persistent gap in the financial technology landscape. While working at Reeves, I had noticed that most financial planning tools were designed either for the very wealthy or for basic consumer budgeting. Middle market businesses, companies with revenues between 10 million and 100 million, were dramatically underserved. They had complex financial needs but lacked the resources to hire firms like Reeves. My concept was an integrated financial intelligence platform specifically designed for these mid-market companies, combining AI-driven financial analysis, scenario planning, and strategic advisory services at a price point they could afford. It would democratize the kind of financial insights that had previously been available only to elite clients. For 3 months, I worked from my apartment, developing the business plan, creating prototype interfaces, and conducting interviews with potential customers. I lived on ramen noodles and coffee, working 18-hour days fueled by a conviction that this concept addressed a real need in the market. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. During this period, my family's response to my departure settled into a pattern of distant disapproval. Sunday dinners continued without me. Holiday invitations came with implicit conditions about not discussing your current situation. My mother told extended family and family friends that I was taking some time to find myself before inevitably returning to Reeves with this phase behind her. When my grandmother called to check on me, she revealed that my mother had been more explicit with the family's inner circle. "Your mother tells everyone you're too irresponsible for the family business," she said, with the direct honesty that only someone in their 80s can get away with. "Says you couldn't handle the structure and expectations." "And what do you think, Grandma?" I asked, bracing for another disappointment. "I think Harold didn't build Reeves by following someone else's rules," she replied, referencing my grandfather. "He built it by seeing opportunities others missed. But don't tell your mother I said that," she added with a chuckle. That brief conversation provided unexpected validation when I needed it most. It also revealed something important. My mother's narrative about my departure was focused on my presumed deficiencies rather than my different strengths. In her version, I had failed Reeves, not the other way around. By month 4 of my venture development, my savings were dwindling, and I needed to secure funding to move forward. The challenge was significant. I had a Harvard-educated family network I couldn't leverage, as approaching anyone connected to my parents would inevitably get back to them. I needed to build entirely new connections. I began attending every startup event, pitch competition, and entrepreneurial networking session in Boston. I volunteered for industry panels, offered free consultations to gain testimonials, and cold emailed successful founders for advice. Most didn't respond, but a few did, including Elena Vasquez, founder of a successful fintech company who became an invaluable mentor. "Your concept is solid," she told me after reviewing my business plan. "But investors don't just fund ideas, they fund people. You need to show them you can execute." Following Elena's advice, I developed a minimally viable version of my platform and convinced 3 medium-sized companies to pilot it for free. The results exceeded even my expectations. One company identified cost inefficiencies that saved them over $200,000 annually. Another used the scenario planning tools to evaluate an acquisition opportunity with greater confidence. Armed with these case studies and Elena's introduction, I secured a meeting with Horizon Ventures, a venture capital firm specializing in fintech startups. The pitch meeting remains crystallized in my memory. 5 partners around a conference table, me in the suit I'd worn at Reeves but with bright red shoes that would have scandalized my mother, a symbolic representation of my professional transformation. "Your background is intriguing," the lead partner remarked after my presentation. "Reeves Consulting has an excellent reputation. Why leave family wealth management to start from scratch?" The question was my opportunity to either embrace or reject my family's narrative about my departure. I chose authenticity. Reeves is excellent at what it does, protecting and growing existing wealth for a select clientele. I'm interested in something different, democratizing financial intelligence for underserved market segments. Both approaches have value, but my vision requires building something new rather than maintaining established systems. 2 weeks later, Horizon offered $2 million in seed funding for what would become Luminary Innovations. The investment came with conditions. I needed to hire an experienced CTO and agree to monthly progress reviews, but it provided the runway to transform my concept into reality. The next 18 months were the most challenging and exhilarating of my life. I assembled a small but exceptional team, each member bringing expertise I lacked: technical development, user experience design, financial compliance, sales strategy. We worked out of a converted warehouse space in South Boston, with mismatched furniture and unreliable heating but unlimited ambition. During this period, my contact with my family became increasingly limited. I attended Christmas and sent appropriate gifts for birthdays and anniversaries, but conversations remained surface level. My parents and siblings asked polite questions about my project, but clearly expected it to fail. Their inquiries containing subtle reminders of the Reeves position that would always be available when I was ready to commit to something substantial. My mother particularly seemed invested in this narrative. At one family gathering, I overheard her speaking to a longtime family friend in the kitchen. "Sophia has always struggled with follow-through," she explained in a hushed but carrying voice. "Remember her marketing platform in college? Or the jewelry design phase she went through at 16? She has these enthusiasms that burn bright but never last. William and I just wait patiently. Eventually, she'll recognize that building something lasting requires discipline she hasn't yet developed." I stood silently in the hallway, a plate of appetizers in hand, absorbing her assessment. The familiar pain of being misunderstood mingled with a new emotion, certainty that she was wrong. Not just subjectively wrong from my perspective, but objectively incorrect in her evaluation of my capabilities. The conviction that I would prove her wrong, not through argument, but through results, carried me through the inevitable challenges of building Luminary. When our first developer quit unexpectedly, when a key client delayed payment causing a cash flow crisis, when a competitor launched a similar service, I persevered with a determination fueled partly by passion for our mission and partly by the desire to definitively rewrite the family narrative about my potential. By the end of our second year, Luminary's success had become undeniable. We had expanded to 28 employees. Our client base had grown to over 70 mid-market companies across multiple industries, and our annual recurring revenue had reached $8 million. Tech publications began featuring us in articles about innovative fintech solutions, and industry awards followed. When Accel Partners approached us with a Series B investment offer that valued the company at $40 million, the validation was both professional and deeply personal. The term sheet arrived on a Wednesday afternoon. After the team celebration, I went home to my now considerably nicer apartment and sat looking at the document, thinking about how far we'd come from my windowless office at Reeves. That Sunday was my father's 60th birthday celebration, a formal dinner my mother had been planning for months. I hadn't intended to discuss Luminary's success at what would inevitably be a Reeves-centric gathering, but something in me had changed. I was no longer willing to accept the role of family disappointment. Not when I had built something valuable entirely on my own terms. I dressed carefully for the occasion, a designer dress that projected success without ostentation, subtle jewelry, and beneath the table where no one could see, those same red shoes I'd worn to my first pitch meeting. A private reminder of how far I'd come. The Reeves family residence stood impressively on Beacon Hill, a 5-story brownstone that had been in the family for generations. As I approached the familiar doorway that evening, I felt a curious sense of detachment. This building, with its polished brass fittings and immaculate stonework, had once represented everything I aspired to: family approval, tradition, belonging. Now it simply seemed like a beautiful but distant artifact from another life. The door opened before I could ring the bell. James, impeccable in a tailored suit despite this being a family gathering, greeted me with the careful cordiality that had characterized our relationship since my departure from Reeves. "Sophia, you made it. Mother wasn't certain you would. Come." His tone conveyed both relief and subtle reproach. "I wouldn't miss Dad's 60th, I replied, handing him the carefully wrapped gift I'd selected. A first-edition copy of a financial history book our father had often mentioned wanting. The foyer opened into the formal living room where about 20 guests were already gathered, my parents' closest friends, a few key Reeves executives, and family members. The space was elegantly decorated with tasteful floral arrangements and understated lighting that highlighted the room's architectural features. My mother had always excelled at creating perfectly calibrated environments. She spotted me from across the room, excusing herself from a conversation with my father's sister, to approach me with measured steps. Victoria Reeves at 58 remained striking. Silver-streaked dark hair pulled into an immaculate chignon, posture that ballet dancers would envy, and a smile that conveyed warmth without quite reaching her eyes. "Sophia, darling." She air-kissed both my cheeks, her signature perfume, something French and exclusively available, enveloping me momentarily. "I'm so pleased you could join us. Your father will be delighted." Her gaze conducted a rapid assessment of my appearance, lingering briefly on my dress, a subtle approval, before returning to my face. "You're looking well. Business must be agreeing with you." Before I could respond, she was already turning, her hand lightly on my elbow to guide me. "Come say hello to the Whitemans. They were just asking about you." The next hour proceeded according to the familiar choreography of Reeves' social events. I circulated through carefully curated conversation groups, answering polite inquiries about my company with deliberately vague responses that neither invited follow-up questions nor suggested particular success. This had become my standard approach at family functions, acknowledging my business without providing details that might prompt comparison with Reeves. My father found me as I was accepting a glass of champagne from a passing server. William Reeves at 60 retained the commanding presence that had defined him throughout my childhood. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a voice that naturally commanded attention in any room. Age had only added gravitas to these qualities, silver temples and laugh lines giving him the distinguished appearance of a man who had earned his success through experience. "There's my independent entrepreneur," he said, embracing me with genuine warmth. Despite our professional differences, my father and I had maintained a relationship less strained than the one I shared with my mother. "I was beginning to think you might have forgotten your old dad's birthday." "Never," I replied, returning his hug. "Happy birthday, Dad. How does 60 feel?" "Like 50 with better wine," he quipped, raising his glass. "And speaking of achievements that come with age, James tells me Reeves just secured the Westbrook account. 3 generations of trying, and we finally brought them over." And there it was, the inevitable pivot to Reeves' business. I had learned to recognize this conversational pattern. Personal connection followed by company discussion, the underlying message always being that family and firm were inseparable. "Congratulations," I said sincerely. "I know how long you've been cultivating that relationship." "Indeed." He nodded, taking a sip of his scotch. "Persistence pays off in this business." "Speaking of which, how is your venture progressing? Still focusing on those mid-market companies?" There was genuine curiosity in his question, unlike my mother's perfunctory inquiries. It offered the perfect opening for what I had decided to share tonight, but the moment was interrupted by the dinner bell, an actual silver bell my mother had inherited from her grandmother and used to signal formal meals. "Ah, your mother has outdone herself with the menu tonight," my father said, offering his arm to escort me to the dining room. "She flew in a chef from that restaurant we visited in Provence last year, the one with the remarkable coq au vin." The dining room showcased my mother's talent for significant occasions. The long mahogany table gleamed under carefully positioned lighting, set with the family's Wedgwood china and sterling silver flatware that emerged only for important celebrations. Place cards in my mother's elegant calligraphy directed guests to their assigned seats. I found myself positioned between Mr. Whiteman, one of my father's oldest clients, and my cousin Rebecca, who worked in Reeves' marketing department. My parents sat at opposite ends of the table, with James and Elizabeth positioned prominently near my father, the heir apparent and his second-in-command symbolically placed for all to observe. The meal progressed with the precision of a military operation disguised as casual elegance. Each course arrived at exactly the right moment. Wine pairings appeared without request, and conversation flowed according to my mother's invisible but masterful orchestration. Topics rotated predictably through safe territories: European travel, recent symphony performances, real estate developments in desirable neighborhoods, and of course, carefully curated Reeves' success stories. During the main course, a perfectly prepared rack of lamb, Mr. Whiteman turned his attention to me. In his 70s, he represented old Boston money, his family's wealth dating back to shipping enterprises established before the Civil War. "Your brother tells me you've started some sort of technology company," he said, cutting his lamb with precise movements. "Something to do with financial analysis?" "Yes, Luminary Innovations," I replied, noting Elizabeth's subtle attention shift from her conversation across the table. "We provide financial intelligence tools for mid-market businesses." "Interesting niche," he commented. "Quite different from the Reeves approach. Always thought your family business focused exclusively on high-net-worth individuals." "That's precisely why I saw an opportunity," I explained. "The financial intelligence that Reeves provides to its clients is invaluable, but it's available only to those with significant wealth. Mid-market companies have complex financial needs, but traditionally couldn't access that level of expertise or technology." Mr. Whiteman nodded thoughtfully. "Democratizing financial intelligence in a sense, novel approach." He took a sip of wine before continuing. "And how is it faring? These startup ventures can be precarious, I understand." The question hung in the air, and I became aware of a subtle shift in the dining room's atmosphere. Nearby, conversations had quieted slightly, attention partially diverted toward our exchange. My mother, despite appearing engaged with the guest to her right, had tilted her head just enough to indicate she was listening. James was watching openly now, his expression a mixture of curiosity and something that resembled concern. It was the moment I had anticipated, the opportunity to finally correct the narrative that had followed me since leaving Reeves. I could feel my heart rate accelerate slightly, but kept my expression composed. "We're actually doing quite well," I said, my voice carrying in the sudden lull of conversation around us. "We just closed our Series B funding round with Accel Partners at a $40 million valuation." The statement landed like a stone dropped into still water, ripples of reaction spreading outward. Mr. Whiteman's eyebrows rose appreciatively. Rebecca beside me made a small sound of surprise. From the corner of my eye, I saw James set down his wine glass with more force than necessary. "$40 million?" Mr. Whiteman repeated, genuine impression evident in his tone. "That's remarkably successful for a company so young. How many years has it been?" "Just under 3 years since we launched," I replied, maintaining the conversational tone as if discussing something as mundane as the weather. "We're now serving over 70 mid-market clients across multiple industries, with an annual recurring revenue approaching $4 million. The ripples had reached the far ends of the table. My father was now openly staring, his conversation with his dinner partner abandoned. Elizabeth had turned completely in her chair to look at me. And my mother, my perfectly composed, perpetually controlled mother, sat frozen, her fork suspended halfway to her mouth, an expression of absolute disbelief transforming her features. The moment stretched, silence expanding to fill the elegant dining room. Then my father recovered, his businessman's instincts overriding his surprise. "That's extraordinary, Sophia," he said, his voice carrying the genuine admiration that had been so rare during my years at Reeves. "Accel Partners is highly selective. Their involvement speaks volumes about Luminary's potential." His response seemed to break the spell. Conversations resumed, though now with a different energy as the news traveled through whispers and glances around the table. I could hear fragments. 40 million. Sophia's company. Never mentioned. Rippling through the gathering. My mother had regained her composure, though a slight flush remained on her cheeks. She signaled subtly to the servers to begin clearing for dessert, her practiced hostess smile firmly back in place. But there was something different in her eyes when they met mine briefly across the table, a complicated mixture of shock, reassessment, and something that might have been chagrin. The remainder of dinner proceeded with an undercurrent of altered perception. Guests who had previously offered me perfunctory attention now directed questions about Luminary with genuine interest. Several of my father's colleagues slipped business cards to me with murmured suggestions to discuss potential synergies. Even James approached during the dessert service, lowering his voice to ask about our technology platform with what appeared to be sincere curiosity. As the evening wound down and guests began departing, I found myself alone in the library with my father. He had retreated there with his traditional birthday scotch, an aged Macallan he allowed himself only on special occasions. He looked up as I entered, gesturing to the leather chair opposite his. "I thought you might join me," he said, rising to pour a second glass. "I believe this warrants a proper toast." He handed me the crystal tumbler, regarding me thoughtfully before raising his glass. "To Luminary Innovations and its remarkably capable founder. 40 million, Sophia. That's more than Reeves was worth when I took over from your grandfather." The pride in his voice was unmistakable, lacking the reservation or qualification I had grown accustomed to hearing. "Thank you," I said, taking a small sip of the peaty scotch. "That means a lot coming from you." "Why didn't you tell us?" he asked directly. "Not tonight. I understand the effect you created, and I must say it was masterfully executed. But before, we've seen you at holidays, family events. You never indicated things were going so well. The question deserved an honest answer. Would you have believed me if I had? Or would it have been dismissed as another one of Sophia's temporary enthusiasms?" He winced slightly, acknowledgement in his expression. "Your mother and I may have underestimated your determination." "It wasn't about determination," I corrected gently. "It was about finding the right fit. Reeves is extraordinary at what it does, but what it does isn't what I'm designed to do. I needed to build something aligned with my strengths rather than constantly adapting to expectations that fought against them." My father contemplated this, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "You know, your grandfather was considered recklessly innovative in his day. The established firms thought he was breaking too many conventions, taking unnecessary risks. The parallels never occurred to me until tonight." The door opened before I could respond, and my mother entered. Her social mask had been replaced by an expression I rarely saw: uncertainty. She hesitated briefly before joining us, declining my father's offered drink with a small shake of her head. "The last guests have left," she said, smoothing her already immaculate dress in an uncharacteristically nervous gesture. "Elizabeth and James are helping the staff with some final arrangements." An awkward silence followed, none of us quite knowing how to navigate this unfamiliar territory. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice lacking its usual definitive tone. "Your announcement at dinner was unexpected." "I imagine it was," I acknowledged, neither apologetic nor confrontational. 40 million, she repeated, the figure clearly still processing in her mind. "With Accel Partners, they're very highly regarded." "They are," I agreed. "Their investment will allow us to expand our AI capabilities and enter international markets next year." She nodded absently, then met my gaze directly. "Why didn't you come to Reeves for investment? We have the venture division that James established 2 years ago." The question revealed so much about her perspective, still viewing my success through the lens of family connection rather than independent achievement. "Because I needed to build this on my own terms," I explained. "Not as William Reeves's daughter, or James's sister, but as Sophia Reeves, founder and CEO. Something shifted in her expression, a subtle relaxation around her eyes, a softening of her perpetually perfect posture. I told everyone you were too irresponsible for the family. Business. The admission hung between us, remarkable for its directness. My mother rarely acknowledged errors or misjudgments. I know, I said simply. I was wrong. The 3 words seemed physically difficult for her to pronounce, each one distinct and deliberate. My father reached over to take her hand, surprising me with this public display of affection, something rarely witnessed in the Reeves household, where emotions were generally considered private matters. We both were, he added. We saw your differences as deficiencies rather than alternative strengths. The acknowledgement was unexpected. I had come tonight prepared for surprise, perhaps reluctant acknowledgement of my success, but not for this moment of genuine recognition. Thank you for saying that, I replied, uncertain how to navigate this new terrain with them. That means more than you might realize. Will you tell us about it? My mother asked, her question carrying layers of meaning beyond the simple request for information. About Luminary? How you built it? What it does? I recognized the question for what it was. Not merely curiosity about business details, but an attempt to understand the path I had chosen, the capabilities they had overlooked, the success they had failed to anticipate. For the next hour, I explained Luminary's development, the initial concept, the challenges of securing funding without leveraging family connections, the pivotal early clients who had validated our approach, the team I had assembled, and why. Each member was essential. I described our technology platform in terms they could appreciate, drawing parallels to Reeves' methodologies while highlighting our innovative differences. They listened with an attention I had rarely experienced from them, asking questions that demonstrated genuine interest rather than evaluation. As I spoke, I could see them mentally reconstructing their understanding of me, reconciling the daughter they thought they knew with the founder who had built a $40 million company without their network, resources, or guidance. When James and Elizabeth joined us, the conversation expanded. Elizabeth, always the most diplomatic family member, readily acknowledged the impressiveness of Luminary's growth trajectory. James's response was more complex. Professional respect mingled with what appeared to be recalibration of our sibling dynamic. You've built something remarkable, he finally said. Completely different from what we do at Reeves, but valuable, in its own right. Coming from James, this represented significant acknowledgement. He had always been the standard bearer, the measuring stick against which my parents had evaluated my sister and me. His recognition carried weight that extended beyond the words themselves. As the evening drew to a close, my mother walked me to the door, a gesture she reserved for their most valued guests. In the privacy of the foyer, away from the others, she spoke quietly. I based my assessment of you on criteria that measured the wrong qualities, she said, her usual precision with words intact despite the emotional content. I failed to recognize that your different approach wasn't irresponsibility but innovation. That was my failure, not yours. The acknowledgement was so unexpected that for a moment I couldn't respond. My mother had always been the family's immovable standard bearer, consistent in her judgments, unwavering in her expectations. This admission represented a fundamental shift. We build different things in different ways, I finally said. Your approach built Reeves. Mine built Luminary. Neither invalidates the other. Something softened in her expression, a glimpse of the mother beneath the perpetual performance of perfection. You were always the bravest of my children. I mistook that courage for recklessness. She reached out, touching my cheek briefly, a rare physical demonstration of affection. I'm proud of you, Sophia. Not because of the valuation or the prestigious investors, but because you saw something we couldn't see and had the courage to pursue it despite our disapproval. The words I had unconsciously sought for most of my life arrived with unexpected impact. Tears threatened, and I blinked them back, unwilling to undermine this moment with emotion that might make her retreat to more comfortable formality. "Thank you," I said simply. "That means everything." As I walked down the brownstone steps, toward the waiting Uber, I felt a curious sense of completeness. I hadn't built Luminary to prove my family wrong or to force their recognition. I had built it because it represented the right expression of my capabilities and vision. Yet the validation I had received tonight closed a circle that had remained, painfully open within me. Not because it granted external approval, but because it represented the possibility of relationship based on who I truly was rather than who they had expected me to be. The next morning, I arrived at Luminary's offices with renewed energy. Our headquarters had evolved significantly from the converted warehouse space of our early days. Now we occupied 2 floors of a renovated textile mill in the emerging innovation district, the brick walls and exposed beams providing character while state-of-the-art technology hummed throughout the space. My executive team had gathered for our weekly strategy meeting. Clara, our brilliant CTO who had left Google to join us. Marcus, the CFO whose financial modeling had impressed even the most skeptical investors. Devi, our chief product officer whose user experience designs had revolutionized how our clients interacted with complex financial data. And Ryan, the chief revenue officer whose sales strategies had accelerated our growth beyond projections. As we discussed the implications of the Axel funding and our expansion plans, I found myself reflecting on the contrasting approaches represented by Reeves and Luminary. Reeves excelled through precision, tradition, and proven methodologies, values my parents had attempted to instill in me since childhood. Luminary thrived on innovation, accessibility, and transformative technology, qualities I had always possessed but had been encouraged to suppress. The revelation wasn't that one approach was superior to the other, but that different visions required different architectures to support them. My family's mistake hadn't been valuing tradition and stability, but assuming these were the only, legitimate foundations for success. My own error had been internalizing their judgment, rather than recognizing the validity of my different perspective. "Sophia?" Clara's voice broke through my reflection. "You seem somewhere else this morning. Everything okay?" I looked at my executive team, these exceptional people who had chosen to join me in building something new, who had seen value in my vision when my own family couldn't. "Everything is excellent," I replied with genuine conviction. I was just thinking about different paths to creating value and how the less conventional route is sometimes exactly the right one. Marcus laughed. "If by less conventional you mean building a $40 million company in under 3 years that's revolutionizing financial intelligence for an underserved market, then yes, I'd say your route is working out quite well." As the meeting continued, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my father. "Your mother and I were wondering if you'd be willing to present Luminary's approach at next month's Reeves Innovation Symposium. We think our team could learn something valuable from your perspective. Proud of you, Sophia." I smiled at the message, not because I needed their platform or approval, but because it represented something I hadn't expected. The possibility that my journey might expand their understanding, just as leaving their prescribed path had expanded mine. The true victory wasn't proving them wrong. It was creating something authentic and valuable despite the weight of their doubts. It was transforming their misconception of too irresponsible into recognition of differently capable. And perhaps most importantly, it was discovering that my worth had never depended on their assessment. It had been within me all along, waiting for the right conditions to flourish. The weeks following my father's birthday dinner marked the beginning of a profound transformation. Not just in my family relationships, but in my understanding of success and validation. The Excel Partners investment had accelerated Luminary's growth trajectory beyond even our ambitious projections, bringing both extraordinary opportunities and complex challenges. Our team expanded rapidly, growing from 28 employees to nearly 50 within 2 months as we scaled our development, customer success, and sales departments. We secured larger office space, occupying 3 full floors of our building to accommodate the growth. The culture I had carefully cultivated during our startup phase faced its first significant test, maintaining our innovative spirit and collaborative approach while integrating new team members and establishing more formal structures. I found myself drawing on unexpected lessons from my Reeves upbringing during this transition. The organizational discipline I had once chafed against provided valuable frameworks for managing expansion. The emphasis on client relationships that had seemed excessively traditional at Reeves offered important guidance for maintaining personalized service despite our increasing scale. Even my mother's insistence on impeccable presentation proved relevant as we refined our brand identity for a broader market. This integration of seemingly opposing approaches, Reeves's structured tradition, and Luminary's innovative flexibility, created something stronger than either methodology alone could have produced. The synthesis represented a personal evolution as well, allowing me to recognize value in my family legacy while remaining true to my distinct vision. The most unexpected development, however, came from my family themselves. The shock of my announcement at the birthday dinner had apparently triggered substantial reflection, particularly for my mother. 2 weeks after the event, she called to invite me to lunch, not at the formal Back Bay restaurant she typically preferred, but at a casual cafe near Luminary's offices. "I'd like to see where you've built all this," she explained, an unfamiliar hesitancy in her voice. "If that wouldn't be disruptive to your workday." The request represented a significant departure from our previous dynamic. In the Reeves family, business domains remained carefully separated. We didn't casually visit each other's professional spaces or blend personal and business interactions without specific purpose. My mother's invitation suggested a genuine desire to understand my world rather than expecting me to accommodate hers. When she arrived at Luminary's headquarters, I observed her taking in every detail. The open floor plan so different from Reeves's traditional private offices, the casual dress code contrasting sharply with Reeves's formal business attire, the collaborative spaces designed for spontaneous ideation rather than scheduled meetings. "It's very energetic," she commented as I guided her through the main workspace. I prepared for criticism disguised as observation, her typical approach. But instead, she added, "I can see how this environment would foster the innovation your business model requires." The acknowledgement, subtle but significant, suggested she was beginning to recognize different business models might legitimately require different environments. This represented considerable evolution for someone who had spent decades believing in a single, correct professional approach. Over lunch, she asked thoughtful questions about Luminary's operations, market strategy, and team structure. She listened with uncharacteristic attentiveness, occasionally noting parallels to challenges Reeves had faced during its own growth phases. The conversation felt less like the performance evaluation tone that had characterized our previous interactions and more like an exchange between professionals with mutual respect. Near the end of our meal, she set down her fork and regarded me with an expression I rarely witnessed: uncertainty. "I've been reflecting on our history," she began carefully, "particularly on how I, responded to your different approach. I've realized something troubling about my perspective." She paused, seeming to gather her thoughts. "Victoria." Reeves had always chosen words with precision, but this deliberateness felt different. Not calculated for effect, but searching for authentic expression. "I equated different with wrong," she continued. "When you questioned established methods or suggested alternative approaches, I interpreted that as rejection of what we had built rather than expansion of possibilities. That was short-sighted. The admission clearly cost her considerable effort. My mother had built her identity around certainty and correctness. Acknowledging a fundamental error in judgment represented significant vulnerability. "Why this change now?" I asked gently. "Is it because Luminary is financially successful?" The question addressed my lingering concern that their revised assessment was based on outcomes rather than recognizing the validity of my different approach regardless of results. She considered this carefully before responding. "The valuation certainly forced me to reconsider my assessment of your business acumen, but my reflection goes deeper than that." She met my gaze directly. "Seeing you that evening, confident, accomplished, clearly in your element, made me realize how much of you I've failed to see over the years because I was looking for a very specific version of success." This recognition represented something more meaningful than approval of Luminary's financial metrics. It acknowledged the legitimacy of my different path regardless of outcome, the principle I had been seeking to establish by building something on my own terms. "I'd like to understand better," she continued, surprising me further. "Not just Luminary as a business, but how you see things. The perspective that led you to identify this opportunity that Reeves overlooked." The conversation that followed was unlike any we had previously shared. Rather than defending my approach or trying to translate it into terms she would accept, I simply explained my vision: democratizing financial intelligence, empowering mid-market companies to make decisions with the same sophistication as larger enterprises, using technology to scale expertise that had traditionally required exclusive personal relationships. She listened with genuine curiosity, occasionally asking questions that revealed thoughtful engagement rather than evaluation. By the time we finished lunch, something fundamental had shifted between us, not erasing our differences, but creating space for them to exist without judgment. As she prepared to leave, she hesitated before saying, "I'm hosting a small dinner next week for some of Boston's women business leaders. It's a quarterly gathering I've organized for years. Would you consider joining us? I think several of them would find your perspective valuable." The invitation represented more than a social engagement. These dinners were my mother's carefully cultivated professional network, influential women she had connected with throughout her career, many of whom had become significant clients or referral sources for Reeves. Including me, acknowledged my professional standing in a way that transcended family connection. "I'd be honored," I replied, recognizing the gesture's significance. "Excellent." She nodded with satisfaction. "And perhaps you might consider a more formal relationship between Luminary and Reeves at some point, not an acquisition," she added quickly, seeing my expression. "But there might be complementary services, referral opportunities. Your father and James have been discussing possibilities." The suggestion remained carefully tentative, acknowledging my independence while opening the door to potential collaboration. It represented a substantial evolution from the previous assumption that my return to Reeves was the only acceptable resolution. "That's worth exploring," I agreed, "once Luminary has completed this growth phase." As we said goodbye, she did something unprecedented in our adult relationship. She hugged me, briefly but genuinely, before stepping back with a small smile that contained both pride and lingering regret for opportunities missed. "You've built something remarkable, Sophia," she said. "Not despite being different from the Reeves model, but because of it." The acknowledgement represented everything I had unconsciously sought throughout our complicated relationship: recognition, not just of achievement, but of the legitimacy of my different path to it. The shifts in my family dynamics coincided with significant evolution at Luminary. The Excel investment had elevated our profile substantially, generating interest from potential clients, partners, and talent far beyond our previous reach. Managing. This sudden visibility presented new challenges: maintaining our innovative culture while scaling, preserving our founding mission amid growth opportunities, balancing expanded capabilities with our core expertise. During this critical phase, I found myself drawing increasingly on a hybrid leadership approach that integrated elements from both worlds that had shaped me: the entrepreneurial creativity that had launched Luminary, and the structured discipline I had absorbed during my Reeves upbringing. This synthesis proved far more powerful than either approach alone would have been. My executive team noticed the evolution. During our quarterly retreat 6 weeks after the investment announcement, Clara, our CTO, commented on the change. "You're bringing in more structure without sacrificing our agility," she observed as we reviewed our product development roadmap. "It's an interesting balance. More Reeves than you've been before, but still fundamentally Luminary in approach. Is that concerning?" I asked, genuinely curious about how this shift was perceived by the team who had joined specifically because of our different approach. "Not at all," she replied thoughtfully. "It's integration rather than abandonment. You're bringing the useful elements of traditional approaches while maintaining our innovative core. It's actually making us stronger." Her assessment echoed my own emerging understanding that the most powerful path forward wasn't rejecting everything associated with Reeves, but selectively incorporating valuable elements while remaining true to Luminary's distinct vision. The realization represented personal as well as professional growth, a more nuanced relationship with my origins rather than the complete separation I had initially pursued. This integration became particularly relevant when an unexpected opportunity emerged 3 months after the Excel investment. Westbrook Financial, one of the prestigious clients my father had mentioned securing for Reeves at his birthday dinner, expressed interest in Luminary's services for a division of their company that fell within our mid-market focus. The situation created potential complications. Westbrook represented exactly the type of established, tradition-oriented client that formed Reeves' core business. Their interest in Luminary could be interpreted as encroachment on Reeves' territory, potentially triggering the competitive dynamic I had been careful to avoid by focusing on an underserved market segment. Rather than making a unilateral decision, I took an approach that would have been unthinkable months earlier. I called my father to discuss the situation directly. "Westbrook has approached us about their sustainable energy division," I explained after outlining the circumstances. "Given your recent client relationship with their parent company, I wanted to ensure we're not creating unnecessary complications." There was a brief silence before my father responded, his tone reflective rather than defensive. "That would have been unimaginable a year ago, Westbrook considering any financial services provider besides Reeves," he said. "But their sustainable energy division is precisely the mid-market segment you've targeted. They're outside our typical client profile." "So you don't see a conflict?" I clarified, somewhat surprised by his perspective. "I see an opportunity," he replied, "for both our companies. Westbrook clearly values having their financial services under coordinated management. What if we proposed a collaborative approach? Reeves handling their wealth management and executive services, Luminary providing financial intelligence for the sustainable energy division?" The suggestion represented a fundamental shift in how he viewed our businesses, not as competing entities where Luminary's gain would be Reeves' loss, but as complementary services that could create greater combined value. "That's actually brilliant," I acknowledged. "It solves Westbrook's needs while respecting both our business models." "I've been studying Luminary's approach since your announcement," he explained. "It's genuinely innovative, Sophia. Different from what we do at Reeves, but valuable in its own right. It's taken me too long to recognize that you weren't rejecting our fundamentals, but building something distinct that serves different needs." The conversation continued, evolving into a detailed discussion of how our companies might collaborate on this specific opportunity while maintaining our independent identities and approaches. The model we developed became a template for other situations where our client bases overlapped, creating more value through collaboration than either company could provide independently. Word of our cooperative approach spread through Boston's financial community, generating interest from other potential clients who saw value in the combination of Reeves' established wealth management expertise and Luminary's innovative financial intelligence technology. What had begun as a practical solution to a specific situation evolved into a strategic advantage for both companies. James, initially the most skeptical about potential collaboration, gradually became one of its strongest advocates after seeing the business development opportunities it created. During a joint client presentation, where we demonstrated the complementary capabilities of our companies, he pulled me aside afterward. "I completely missed the potential here," he admitted with uncharacteristic frankness. "I was so focused on traditional competition models that I couldn't see how different approaches could be complementary rather than contradictory." "It took me time to see it too," I acknowledged. "I was so determined to establish Luminary as completely separate from Reeves that I nearly missed opportunities for mutually beneficial connection." This evolving relationship with my family business coincided with personal growth in my leadership approach. The binary thinking that had characterized my early departure from Reeves, rejecting everything associated with their methodology to establish something entirely different, had evolved into more nuanced integration. I found myself consciously incorporating valuable elements of the Reeves approach while maintaining Luminary's distinct identity and vision. This synthesis became particularly evident during our expansion into international markets. The careful research, thorough due diligence, and methodical implementation planning that Reeves emphasized proved invaluable when navigating unfamiliar regulatory environments and cultural contexts. Meanwhile, Luminary's innovative technology and adaptive approach enabled us to customize our platform for different market needs rather than imposing standardized solutions. The combination created something stronger than either approach alone could have produced: the stability and thoroughness of established methodologies supporting the agility and innovation of entrepreneurial thinking. This integration manifested not just in business strategy but in my personal leadership style, combining the structured discipline of my family legacy with the creative vision that had launched Luminary. 6 months after the Excel investment announcement, Boston Business Journal selected me for their Visionary Leader Award, an annual recognition of executives who had demonstrated both innovation and substantial business impact. The profile article that accompanied the award highlighted Luminary's rapid growth, our unique market position, and the unusual collaboration model we had established with Reeves Consulting. The journalist who interviewed me asked directly about the evolution of that relationship, aware of the family connection but not the full complexity of our history. "There was speculation that your departure from Reeves to found Luminary might create competitive tension," she noted. "Instead, you've established what appears to be a productive collaboration. Was that always the plan?" I considered how to answer truthfully while respecting both my family's privacy and the genuine progress we had made. "The path wasn't straightforward," I acknowledged. "Building Luminary required establishing a distinct identity and approach that differs significantly from Reeves Consulting. That necessary separation initially created distance, both professionally and personally. What's evolved more recently is recognition that different doesn't mean opposing. It can mean complementary, creating more value through collaboration than either approach could independently." "And your family?" she pressed gently. "Has that professional evolution affected personal relationships?" The question touched on the heart of the transformation that had occurred over the previous months. "Profoundly," I replied after a thoughtful pause. "Beyond the business implications, there's been a deeper recognition that different approaches can be equally valid, that contribution and value aren't limited to a single model or methodology. That understanding has created space for more authentic connection based on who we actually are, rather than who we expected each other to be." The article was published on a Thursday morning, By afternoon, both Luminary and Reeves had received numerous inquiries about our collaboration model from potential clients interested in accessing our complementary services. What had begun as personal growth had evolved into genuine business advantage for both companies. That evening, my parents invited me to dinner at their home. Not a formal gathering, but a private meal for just the three of us. When I arrived, I found the formal dining room bypassed in favor of the rarely used kitchen table, a casual setting that signaled a different type of conversation. My mother had prepared the meal herself, another departure from established patterns, as she typically engaged professional catering for any gathering beyond breakfast. The simple but elegant dinner reflected her characteristic attention to detail, while eliminating the performative aspect that usually accompanied Reeves' entertaining. As we settled at the table, my father opened a bottle of wine, a specific vintage I recognized from family discussions years earlier. "This is the Bordeaux from the year grandfather founded Reeves," I noted, surprised by his selection. The bottle represented a significant piece of family history, typically reserved for major celebrations or commemorations. "It seemed appropriate," he replied, filling our glasses. "We're marking an important transition tonight." My mother nodded agreement. The Business Journal article captured something important about what's happening between our companies, but also within our family. It feels worthy of acknowledgement. The conversation that followed was unlike any we had previously shared. Rather than focusing on business developments or external achievements, we discussed the journey that had brought us to this point, their gradual recognition of value in different approaches, my evolving integration of traditional elements with innovative vision, our collective discovery that collaboration could create more than competitive separation. "I've been reflecting on when things began to shift," my mother said thoughtfully. "For me, it wasn't actually at William's birthday dinner when you announced Luminary's valuation. That certainly demanded attention, but the deeper change came afterward, seeing you in your element at Luminary's offices, confidently leading something fundamentally different from Reeves, but unquestionably valuable. For me, it was the Westbrook collaboration," my father added. "Watching you navigate that situation with such clarity about both Luminary's identity and the potential for complementary approaches. It demonstrated a maturity of vision I hadn't yet fully appreciated before." Their insights revealed something important, that the transformation in our relationship hadn't resulted simply from Luminary's financial success, but from their witnessing authentic leadership expressing my distinct capabilities. The validation wasn't about proving my worth through metrics they recognized, but about them expanding their understanding of what constituted value and contribution. "When did it change for you, Sophia?" my mother asked, genuine curiosity in her expression. "When did you begin to see potential in connection rather than only in separation?" The question deserved thoughtful consideration. "It was gradual," I finally responded, partly from recognizing that completely rejecting the Reeves approach limited Luminary as much as blindly accepting it would have. The structured discipline I absorbed growing up actually provided valuable foundation for innovation when applied selectively rather than comprehensively. I paused, considering the personal dimension of the question. But the deeper shift came from realizing that proving you wrong was never actually the point. Building something authentic and valuable was the goal, something aligned with my capabilities and vision rather than defined in opposition to your expectations. This perspective seemed to resonate with them both, acknowledgement in their expressions. We continued talking long after the meal was finished, exploring aspects of our family and professional history with a candor that would have been impossible months earlier. As the evening concluded, my father retrieved a small wrapped package from his study. "We have something for you," he said, placing it on the table. "Not a peace offering, we're well beyond that need now, but a recognition." Inside was a silver business card case, elegantly crafted but without ostentation. Engraved on its surface was the Luminary Innovations logo, and beneath it, in small, precise lettering. Different paths, equal value. The inscription acknowledged, with simple eloquence, the fundamental understanding we had reached, that contribution and worth weren't confined to a single approach or model, that my different path was neither lesser nor merely alternate, but valuable in its distinct expression. "It's perfect," I said, genuinely moved by the thoughtfulness behind the gift. "Thank you." My mother reached across the table, briefly covering my hand with hers. "We're the ones who should be thanking you, Sophia. Your courage in pursuing your vision despite our disapproval has expanded not just what our family can accomplish professionally, but who we can be with each other. That's a gift beyond measure." As I drove home that evening, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this point. The path hadn't been direct or simple. It had required painful separation, determined independence, and eventual mutual recognition. The transformation wasn't about erasing our differences, but creating space for them to exist without judgment, allowing each approach to contribute distinct value. The next morning at Luminary's weekly leadership meeting, I shared aspects of our evolving relationship with Reeves and the expanded collaboration opportunities it presented. The discussion naturally turned to how this integration of approaches could strengthen our core operations while maintaining our distinct identity. "It's a powerful synthesis," Marcus observed. "The innovative agility that makes Luminary unique, supported by selected elements of established methodology that add stability and scalability. Neither approach compromising the other, but each contributing complementary strength." His assessment captured precisely what had emerged from this evolution: not compromise that weakened both approaches, but integration that strengthened each through thoughtful synthesis. As the meeting concluded, Clara lingered behind, her expression thoughtful. "You know, when you first recruited me from Google, I was drawn to Luminary precisely because it represented something different from traditional financial services. I was slightly concerned when I noticed you incorporating more structured elements recently, worried we might lose our innovative edge." "And now?" I asked, curious about her perspective. "Now I see it's not replacement, but enhancement," she replied. "You're not becoming more like Reeves at the expense of Luminary's identity. You're selectively integrating valuable elements while maintaining our core approach. It's making us stronger." Her observation crystallized the broader transformation that had occurred, not just in business strategy or family relationships, but in fundamental understanding of how different approaches could interact. The either-or thinking that had characterized earlier phases had evolved into both, and integration that created greater possibilities than either approach alone could produce. This evolution continued expanding over subsequent months, creating unexpected opportunities for both companies. Reeves began selectively incorporating technology elements developed at Luminary to enhance their high-touch service model. Meanwhile, Luminary benefited from Reeves's established risk management frameworks as we expanded into new markets. The collaboration extended beyond business operations to industry leadership. 6 months after the Business Journal profile, my father and I were invited to deliver a joint keynote at Boston's Financial Innovation Summit, a prestigious industry event typically dominated by established institutions. Our presentation on complementary disruption integrating traditional expertise with technological innovation drew record attendance and generated substantial industry discussion. Standing beside my father on that stage, presenting our distinct but interconnected perspectives on financial services evolution, I experienced a profound sense of completion. The journey hadn't ended with proving my family wrong about my capabilities or demonstrating Luminary's superiority over Reeves. It had culminated in something far more valuable, creating space for different approaches to exist without hierarchy or judgment, each contributing unique value to a more complete whole. The true transformation wasn't about rejection or replacement, but integration and expansion, recognizing that innovation and tradition structure and flexibility, established wisdom and fresh perspective could create something stronger together than either could produce alone. This understanding extended beyond business strategy to reshape personal identity and relationship, creating possibilities for connection based on authentic difference rather than imposed conformity. As we concluded our presentation to enthusiastic applause, my father turned to me with genuine respect in his expression. Not because I had finally met his expectations, but because he had expanded his understanding to recognize the value in my different path. The acknowledgement wasn't about changed behavior to match established standards, but about revised standards that created space for different but equally valuable contributions. That recognition represented the most meaningful outcome of this journey. Not external validation through metrics or accolades, but internal transformation that allowed authentic expression of distinct capabilities and vision. The path forward wasn't about choosing between approaches, but thoughtfully integrating complementary elements to create something stronger than either alone could produce. In that integration lay the true power of transformation, not erasing differences, but creating space for them to contribute their unique value to a more complete and effective whole. 1 year after the pivotal Accel Partners investment, Luminary, innovations had transformed from a promising startup into an established industry presence. Our client base had expanded to over 200 mid-market companies across 3 continents. Our team had grown to nearly 120 employees, and our valuation had reached $65 million following an additional funding round. This rapid growth brought both extraordinary opportunities and complex challenges. Scaling operations while maintaining our innovative culture required constant attention. Expanding into international markets demanded navigation of different regulatory environments and cultural contexts. Building a leadership team capable of managing this complexity meant recruiting executives who balanced technical expertise with cultural alignment. Through these developments, the collaborative relationship with Reeves Consulting continued evolving in unexpected ways. What had begun as a pragmatic arrangement to address specific client situations had developed into a strategic alliance that created unique market advantages for both companies. The combination of Reeves' established methodology and reputation with Luminary's technological innovation and agility allowed us to serve client needs more comprehensively than either company could independently. This business evolution paralleled personal growth in my relationship with my family. The initial reconciliation following my father's birthday dinner had deepened into genuine connection based on mutual respect rather than conditional approval. My mother, once my most persistent critic, had become an unexpected advocate, recommending Luminary's services to her extensive network of business connections. Most surprisingly, my brother James, who had initially viewed my departure from Reeves as implicit criticism of his commitment to the family legacy, had developed genuine appreciation for Luminary's approach. Our companies had established a quarterly leadership exchange program where selected team members spent time working within the other organization, sharing expertise and perspectives that strengthened both. On a crisp autumn morning 18 months after the Accel investment, I received a call from Martin Reynolds, editor of Financial Innovation Review, a prestigious industry publication that typically focused on established institutions rather than emerging companies. "Ms. Reeves," he began with characteristic directness, "we're preparing our annual Transforming Finance issue, and we'd like to feature Luminary Innovations as this year's cover story." The request represented significant recognition beyond Luminary's financial success. Financial Innovation Review was highly selective about which companies it featured, evaluating not just growth metrics, but lasting impact on industry practices. "That's a considerable honor," I replied. "What aspects of Luminary's approach interest you particularly?" "3 things," Reynolds answered methodically. "First, your technology platform has introduced capabilities previously unavailable to mid-market companies, essentially democratizing financial intelligence that was historically accessible only to major corporations. Second, your collaboration model with Reeves Consulting demonstrates an innovative approach to industry evolution, complementary disruption rather than competitive replacement. And third, your leadership journey itself represents an important case study in recognizing different paths to value creation. The last point surprised me. My personal journey isn't something we typically highlight in our company communications. Perhaps not, he acknowledged, but it's becoming well known in industry circles. The narrative of leaving an established family firm to build something different, facing skepticism, achieving independent success, and then developing collaborative integration rather than competitive opposition. It's a powerful illustration of how innovation actually occurs in practice. His perspective highlighted how our story had transcended purely business dimensions to represent broader principles about leadership, innovation, and institutional evolution. After discussing the article parameters, I agreed to the interview, recognizing its potential value not just for Luminary's visibility, but for others navigating similar journeys. The week before the interview, I invited my parents and siblings to dinner at my home, a modern penthouse in Boston's Seaport District with views of the harbor, purchased the previous year as Luminary's success stabilized. The gathering represented another evolution in our family dynamic. These meals had once been formal, highly structured affairs at my parents' Beacon Hill residence, governed by implicit rules about appropriate topics and behaviors. Now they alternated between our homes, with more relaxed interactions and genuine exchange. As we enjoyed after-dinner drinks on my terrace overlooking the water, I mentioned the upcoming Financial Innovation Review article. They're interested not just in Luminary's business model, but in the evolution of our company's relationship, I explained. I wanted to ensure everyone is comfortable with me discussing that aspect publicly. My father considered this thoughtfully, before responding. The relationship between Reeves and Luminary has been beneficial for both companies. I see no reason not to acknowledge that journey. I agree, James added, surprising me with his ready support. Our collaboration model has generated significant client interest. The article could actually strengthen both our market positions. My mother's response was more personal. Will the article address the family aspects? She asked directly. Our initial skepticism about your direction? The question acknowledged what we all recognized, that the business collaboration had emerged from complicated personal history involving doubt, disapproval, and eventual reconciliation. They've expressed interest in that dimension, I confirmed. Reynolds believes it illustrates important principles about how innovation occurs despite institutional resistance. But I wouldn't include personal details without everyone's agreement. She exchanged glances with my father before responding. Perhaps it's a story worth telling, she said carefully. Not just for business implications, but for others facing similar situations, parents who don't recognize different but equally valuable paths, children struggling to establish independent identities while maintaining family connections. Her perspective revealed how profoundly her understanding had evolved, from viewing my departure as rejection of family values to recognizing it as a necessary step toward authentic contribution. If they portray it accurately, my father added, it might help other family businesses navigate these transitions more gracefully than we initially did. Their openness to sharing our complicated journey publicly represented significant growth from the careful image management that had characterized the Reeves approach to public perception. This willingness to acknowledge mistakes and evolution, rather than presenting a facade of perfect certainty, marked another dimension of transformation. The Financial Innovation Review interview took place in Luminary's headquarters the following week, with photographer Elaine Wu capturing images of our workspace and team interactions to accompany the article. Reynolds's questions were thoughtful and penetrating, exploring not just Luminary's business model, but the philosophical underpinnings of our approach. You've described Luminary's mission as democratizing financial intelligence, he noted. What drove that specific focus? It emerged from recognizing a fundamental inequity in access to sophisticated financial analysis, I explained. Companies with $50 million in revenue face complex financial decisions just like billion-dollar corporations, but historically they've lacked access to the tools and expertise that larger enterprises consider essential. That imbalance limits their strategic options and often their growth potential. And this recognition came partly from your experience at Reeves Consulting? He prompted. Yes, though not in the way you might expect, I clarified. Reeves excels at providing high-touch financial advisory services to high-net-worth clients and major corporations. That's valuable and important work. But while there, I became increasingly aware of this other underserved market segment that required a fundamentally different approach, more technology-driven, more scalable, more accessible. The conversation turned to Luminary's evolution, from concept to established company, including the challenges of securing initial funding without leveraging family connections, building credibility in a traditionally relationship-driven industry, and scaling operations while maintaining our innovative culture. Eventually, Reynolds addressed the more personal dimensions. Your departure from Reeves Consulting to found Luminary created significant discussion in financial circles, he noted. There was speculation about potential family conflict or competitive tension, yet now the companies have an unusual collaborative relationship. How did that evolution occur? The question invited a narrative that could have emphasized either conflict or resolution. I chose a more nuanced approach that honored both the genuine challenges and the meaningful growth that had emerged from them. The journey wasn't linear, I acknowledged. Building Luminary required establishing a distinct identity and approach, which initially created distance both professionally and personally. What's evolved since then is recognition that different doesn't mean opposing, that diverse approaches can create complementary value rather than merely competing for the same space. Was that understanding immediate following Luminary's market validation? He asked perceptively. No, I admitted with a smile. Success opened the door to reconsideration, but the deeper recognition developed gradually through specific situations where collaboration created better outcomes than either company could achieve independently. Those practical experiences led to philosophical evolution, understanding that innovation and tradition can strengthen rather than threaten each other when they interact thoughtfully. Reynolds nodded, making notes before asking his next question. Your mother, Victoria Reeves, has been a significant figure in Boston's financial community for decades. Has her perspective on your different path evolved? The question touched on perhaps the most profound transformation in our family dynamics. I considered how to address it respectfully while acknowledging the genuine change that had occurred. My mother built her career in a different era of financial services, when established methodologies and institutional stability were paramount. I began carefully. Her initial concern about my different approach was understandable from that perspective. What's been remarkable is her willingness to reconsider those assumptions as she's observed both Luminary's development and the changing industry landscape. That's not a common trait in successful leaders of her generation, Reynolds commented. No, it isn't, I agreed. It reflects an exceptional capacity for growth that I've come to appreciate more fully. She's demonstrated that conviction and flexibility aren't mutually exclusive, that strong values can coexist with evolving understanding. The observation captured something essential about my mother's journey, not abandonment of her principles, but expansion of her perspective to incorporate new possibilities within her existing framework of excellence and contribution. As the interview concluded, Reynolds asked a final question that extended beyond business implications. What would you say to others facing similar situations, individuals with different visions within established family businesses or traditional industries? The question invited reflection on the broader principles our journey might illustrate. For others, I considered carefully before responding. I'd suggest that creating something new doesn't necessarily require rejecting what came before. The most powerful innovation often integrates valuable elements of established approaches while introducing necessary evolution. And I'd emphasize that different paths can create equal value. That contribution isn't limited to a single model or methodology. I paused, then added, perhaps most importantly, I'd encourage perseverance through the inevitable resistance. Meaningful innovation rarely receives immediate recognition, especially from those invested in existing systems. That resistance doesn't necessarily indicate wrongness of direction. Sometimes it simply reflects the challenge of recognizing unfamiliar forms of value. The Financial Innovation Review article appeared 6 weeks later, featuring Luminary's headquarters on the cover with the headline, Complementary Disruption: How Luminary Innovations is Redefining Financial Intelligence. The piece thoughtfully explored both Luminary's business model and the evolution of our relationship with Reeves Consulting, presenting the journey as illustrative of broader principles about effective innovation and institutional evolution. Most remarkably, the article included comments from my family members. My father discussed the strategic advantages of our collaboration model. James acknowledged how Luminary's approach had influenced positive changes within Reeves's operations. And my mother offered perhaps the most significant perspective, addressing her evolving understanding with characteristic precision. In established industries, we often mistake different for deficient, she was quoted saying. Sophia's approach wasn't a rejection of Reeves' values, but their expression through different methods appropriate for different market needs. Recognizing that distinction has created value not just for both companies, but for our broader understanding of how innovation actually occurs, not through wholesale replacement of existing systems, but through thoughtful evolution that integrates the best of both approaches. Her public acknowledgement of this evolution represented extraordinary growth from the woman who had once dismissed my different perspective as irresponsibility and lack of discipline. The transformation reflected not just changed assessment based on financial outcomes, but fundamental reconsideration of how value could be created through diverse approaches. The article generated substantial industry attention, with several business publications featuring follow-up pieces exploring the complementary disruption model we had developed. Requests for speaking engagements followed, including an invitation to deliver a joint presentation with my father at the prestigious Global Financial Forum, a platform typically reserved for established industry leaders rather than emerging companies. Beyond these professional opportunities, the article's publication marked another milestone in our family's journey. The public acknowledgement of our initial misalignment and subsequent reconciliation removed any remaining need for artificial narratives about our history. The authentic story, including both the challenges and the growth, had become not a source of embarrassment requiring management, but a valuable illustration of important principles worth sharing. This transparency created space for deeper connection, not just within our immediate family, but with the extended Reeves network. Conversations at industry events no longer required careful navigation around potentially sensitive topics. The transformation in our relationship had become part of our shared narrative rather than a subject to be avoided. 2 months after the article's publication, Luminary reached another significant milestone. We received acquisition interest from Sentinel Financial, one of the world's largest financial services corporations. Their initial offer valued Luminary at $120 million, a dramatic increase from our recent $65 million valuation and a remarkable figure for a company not yet 4 years old. The proposal required careful consideration. Sentinel's resources could accelerate Luminary's growth and extend our impact significantly. Their global presence would immediately expand our reach far beyond what we could achieve independently in the near term. The financial return for our investors and team members would be exceptional. However, the acquisition would also inevitably change Luminary's character and approach. Sentinel's size and publicly traded status created different operational constraints and priorities than our independent structure. Their established systems would influence our innovative culture, potentially in ways that might compromise the very elements that had driven our success. As I evaluated this opportunity, I realized I needed perspectives beyond Luminary's executive, team, and board. I arranged a private dinner with my parents and James at my father's favorite restaurant, a discreet establishment where Boston's business leaders had conducted important conversations for decades. After sharing the acquisition details, I asked simply, "What would you do in my position?" My father considered the question carefully before responding. "The financial terms are certainly attractive," he began analytically. "And Sentinel's resources would accelerate your market expansion considerably. But ownership structure fundamentally influences company character. The question isn't just about growth rate or financial return, it's about what Luminary might become within their corporate architecture." "Would you have sold Reeves at a similar stage if offered comparable terms?" I asked, curious about how he would have navigated a similar decision. "No," he replied without hesitation. "But not because acquisition is inherently wrong. Reeves's value proposition depended specifically on our independence and long-term relationship continuity. Our clients chose us partly because we weren't subject to quarterly earnings pressures or corporate parent priorities. For Luminary, the calculation might be different given your technology-driven model and different client relationships." My mother's perspective approached the question from another angle. "Beyond business considerations," she said thoughtfully, "there's the question of your personal fulfillment. Building something from concept to established presence creates a particular type of satisfaction. Would leading Luminary as a division within Sentinel provide similar meaning?" Her question highlighted how significantly her understanding had evolved, recognizing that my decisions should consider personal fulfillment alongside financial and strategic factors. This represented extraordinary growth from her previous focus, on duty and responsibility above individual preference. James offered the most surprising perspective. "3 years ago, I would have advocated accepting the offer," he admitted frankly. "I would have seen it as validation and logical culmination, building something valuable enough to attract major corporate interest." "And now?" I prompted, curious about his evolved thinking. "Now I see something different emerging between Luminary and Reeves," he replied. "Our collaboration model is creating advantages neither company could develop independently. That evolving relationship might generate more long-term value, both financially and in broader impact, than the immediate return from acquisition." Their diverse perspectives highlighted important considerations beyond the standard acquisition analysis. My father emphasized how ownership structure influences organizational character. My mother raised questions about personal meaning beyond financial outcome. James identified potential in our evolving collaboration that might exceed the value of immediate acquisition returns. These insights informed my decision-making process over subsequent weeks as we conducted formal discussions with Sentinel and evaluated alternatives. Ultimately, after thorough consideration, I declined their acquisition offer while proposing a strategic partnership that would preserve Luminary's independence while creating collaborative opportunities. We believe Luminary can create greater long-term value by remaining independent while developing strategic relationships with complementary organizations, I explained to Sentinel's CEO during our final discussion. "We're interested in partnership models that leverage respective strengths without requiring ownership integration." To my surprise, he received this alternative positively. "Your approach aligns with observations in the Financial Innovation Review article," he noted. "Complementary relationships rather than absorption or replacement. It's an interesting model we haven't fully explored." The conversation evolved into discussions about potential collaboration structures, eventually resulting in a strategic partnership agreement that included Sentinel distributing Luminary's platform to selected client segments while preserving our independent operations and decision-making. The arrangement provided many advantages acquisition would have offered, expanded market reach, additional resources, enhanced credibility, without compromising our organizational integrity or approach. This resolution represented another expression of the fundamental principle that had emerged throughout our journey, that different models and methodologies could create complementary value rather than merely competing for the same space. The partnership with Sentinel extended this understanding beyond our family business relationship to engagement with major institutional players, suggesting broader applications for this collaborative approach to industry evolution. 2 weeks. After finalizing the Sentinel partnership, my parents invited me to dinner at their Beacon Hill home. When I arrived, I found not the formal dining room setting of previous years, but a casual arrangement in the rarely used family room, comfortable seating around the fireplace rather than structured positioning at the mahogany table. As we enjoyed aperitifs before dinner, my father revealed the purpose behind their invitation. "Your grandfather's 100th birthday would have been next month," he began, referencing Harold Reeves, who had founded our family business in 1962. "We've been discussing appropriate ways to honor his legacy. The Reeves Foundation typically makes a commemorative grant for such occasions," my mother added. "We've been considering potential recipients." I nodded, familiar with this tradition. The Reeves Family Foundation, established decades earlier to manage the family's philanthropic activities, regularly made significant grants aligned with our values of education, financial literacy, and community development. "We'd like your input on a particular possibility," my father continued. "We're considering establishing the Harold Reeves Innovation Fellowship, a program that would identify promising entrepreneurs from underrepresented backgrounds and provide both funding and mentorship to develop financial service innovations that address underserved markets." The concept immediately resonated with Luminary's mission of democratizing financial intelligence. "That sounds like an excellent tribute to grandfather's entrepreneurial spirit," I agreed. "What organization would administer the fellowship?" My parents exchanged glances before my mother responded. "We were hoping you might consider co-developing and co-leading the initiative," she said. "Perhaps as a collaborative project between the Reeves Foundation, Luminary Innovations, and Reeves Consulting." The suggestion represented extraordinary evolution in their thinking, proposing a philanthropic initiative that would explicitly support the development of financial innovations, potentially quite different from the traditional Reeves approach. "The idea," my father elaborated, "would be to identify individuals with promising concepts that traditional financial institutions might overlook, much as your idea for Luminary might have been overlooked had you not had the resources and determination to develop it independently. The fellowship would provide funding, mentorship, and institutional connections to help these entrepreneurs navigate early-stage development." The proposal represented perfect synthesis of our respective strengths and perspectives, combining Reeves's established reputation and institutional knowledge with Luminary's innovative approach and understanding of developing alternative models. More significantly, it acknowledged that valuable financial innovation often emerges from perspectives different from established institutions, the very principle that had driven Luminary's creation. "I think it's a wonderful concept," I said, sincerely, "and exactly the right tribute to grandfather's legacy of seeing opportunities others missed." As we discussed implementation details over dinner, I recognized how profoundly all our perspectives had evolved. My parents now actively supported exploring different approaches to financial services rather than defending a single, correct methodology. I had developed appreciation for valuable elements of traditional models rather than defining my approach solely in opposition to established systems. Together, we had discovered that our different perspectives could create complementary strength rather than competitive weakness. 2 weeks later, we announced the Harold Reeves Innovation Fellowship with joint press releases from Luminary Innovations, Reeves Consulting, and the Reeves Family Foundation. The program would provide 5 fellowships annually, each including $250,000 in funding, mentorship from both Luminary and Reeves executives, and access to our respective networks and resources. The announcement generated significant industry attention, with several financial publications highlighting the unusual collaboration between traditional and innovative approaches. Applications flooded in from entrepreneurs with diverse backgrounds and perspectives, many with concepts that addressed markets traditional institutions had overlooked or underserved. As we evaluated these applications alongside my parents and brother during a weekend retreat at our family's Cape Cod home, I reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought us to this point. 4 years earlier, I had left Reeves Consulting, amid skepticism about my different approach, determined to build something that would validate my distinct vision. That separate path had been necessary to establish Luminary's independent identity and approach. Yet the ultimate resolution hadn't been perpetual separation, but evolved integration. Not my approach replacing theirs or their methodology absorbing mine, but thoughtful collaboration that preserved our distinct identities while creating complementary value. This synthesis hadn't diluted either approach, but strengthened both through selective integration of complementary elements. This evolution extended beyond business operations to transform our family relationships. The conditional approval based on conformity to established expectations had given way to mutual respect for different but equally valuable contributions. The binary framework that categorized approaches as either correct or deficient had evolved into nuanced appreciation for diverse methodologies serving different needs. Perhaps most significantly, the journey had demonstrated that meaningful innovation doesn't typically occur through complete rejection of established systems or wholesale replacement of existing approaches. Rather, it emerges from thoughtful evolution that integrates valuable traditional elements with necessary adaptation to changing circumstances and needs. As we selected the inaugural cohort of Harold Reeves Innovation Fellows, 5 extraordinary entrepreneurs with diverse backgrounds and perspectives, I recognized that our family's journey had created something more valuable than either separate success or forced conformity could have produced. The synthesis of our different approaches had generated not just complementary business advantages, but expanded understanding of how innovation actually occurs and how family relationships can evolve beyond limiting expectations toward authentic appreciation of diverse contributions. This understanding represented the most meaningful outcome of our transformation. Not just personal reconciliation or collaborative business operations, but expanded perspective on how different paths can create equal value and how apparent opposition can evolve into complementary strength. That principle had application far beyond our specific circumstances, offering guidance for other family businesses, traditional industries facing disruption, and individuals navigating the complex territory between honoring legacy and pursuing innovation. The Harold Reeves Innovation Fellowship embodied this understanding, creating structure to support others following their own different paths toward valuable contribution. Its establishment represented not just philanthropic initiative, but philosophical evolution, recognition that the most meaningful legacy isn't preservation of particular methodologies, but perpetuation of the entrepreneurial spirit that identifies opportunities others have missed and develops approaches appropriate for evolving needs. As we finalized our selection of the inaugural fellows, my mother articulated this perspective with characteristic precision. "Your grandfather built Reeves by seeing possibilities others overlooked," she observed. "These entrepreneurs are doing exactly that, though their approaches differ significantly from our traditional methods. Supporting their development honors his legacy more authentically than simply perpetuating established systems." Her observation captured the essential understanding that had emerged through our journey. That legacy isn't about preserving specific methodologies, but continuing the fundamental spirit of innovation and contribution that created value in the first place. This recognition liberated both traditional institutions and innovative ventures from unnecessary opposition, creating space for complementary evolution that strengthened both through thoughtful integration. 4 years after leaving Reeves Consulting, Amid skepticism about my different approach, I had built Luminary Innovations into a company valued at over $100 million that served hundreds of clients across multiple continents. That success had validated my distinct vision and approach beyond any lingering doubt. Yet the most meaningful outcome hadn't been proving skeptics wrong or demonstrating superior methodology, but discovering how different approaches could create complementary value rather than merely competing for the same space. This understanding represented true transformation, not just successful execution of an alternative business model, but evolved comprehension of how innovation actually occurs and how diverse perspectives can strengthen rather than threaten established value. The journey had created not just a successful company, but expanded perspective with application far beyond our specific circumstances. As we prepared the formal announcement of our inaugural Innovation Fellows, I reflected on the title of the Financial Innovation Review article that had captured public attention months earlier. Complementary disruption. The phrase perfectly described what had emerged through our journey, not disruption that replaced existing systems, but evolution that complemented established approaches while introducing necessary adaptation to changing circumstances and needs. This complementary model offered guidance for navigating the complex relationship between tradition and innovation, between established value and necessary evolution. It suggested that the most effective transformation doesn't occur through wholesale rejection or replacement, but through thoughtful integration that preserves valuable elements while introducing needed adaptation. That understanding represented the most significant insight from our journey, applicable not just to business innovation, but to personal growth, family relationships, institutional evolution, and societal change. The recognition that different doesn't mean deficient, that diverse approaches can create complementary rather than competitive value, that apparent opposition can evolve into integrated strength. These principles transcended our specific circumstances to offer broader wisdom about navigating complex transitions of all kinds. The most powerful transformation hadn't been building a successful company or achieving family reconciliation, though both represented meaningful accomplishments. The most profound evolution had been developing this expanded understanding of how different paths can create equal value and how diverse perspectives can strengthen rather than threaten each other when they interact thoughtfully rather than oppositionally. This wisdom represented the true legacy of our journey, not just successful execution of a different approach, but evolved comprehension of how transformation actually occurs and how apparent limitations can become distinctive strengths when placed in appropriate contexts. That understanding would continue guiding our development long after specific achievements had been surpassed or circumstances had changed again. The complementary model we had developed offered not final resolution, but ongoing framework for navigating the perpetual tension between established value and necessary evolution, suggesting that the most effective approach isn't choosing one at the expense of the other, but thoughtful integration that creates something stronger than either alone could produce. 5 years after founding Luminary Innovations, I found myself on stage at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. I had been invited to participate in a panel discussion titled Democratizing Financial Intelligence, the Next Frontier in Global Economic Inclusion. Joining me were CEOs from established financial institutions, founders of emerging fintech companies, and economic development experts from various countries. Looking out at the audience of influential global leaders, I felt a profound sense of responsibility. This wasn't just about Luminary's success story, but about advancing a fundamental principle that had emerged through our journey. Financial intelligence shouldn't be the exclusive province of wealthy individuals and major corporations. Complex decision-making tools could and should be accessible to businesses of all sizes, particularly the mid-market companies that drive significant economic growth and employment. As the moderator introduced me, she highlighted Luminary's growth trajectory, now serving over 500 clients across 27 countries, with a recent valuation exceeding $210 million. These metrics reflected extraordinary business success, but they weren't what gave me the deepest satisfaction. What truly mattered was the impact our platform had created for mid-market companies previously excluded from sophisticated financial intelligence tools. When asked about Luminary's origin story, I shared the journey honestly, leaving the established family firm amid skepticism, building something aligned with my distinct vision despite resistance, developing a collaborative model that ultimately strengthened both companies. The narrative resonated with many in the audience who had navigated similar tensions between tradition and innovation in their own organizations or industries. What's particularly noteworthy about Luminary's approach, the moderator observed, is that it didn't simply replace traditional financial advisory services, but created complementary capabilities for an underserved market segment. Could you elaborate on that philosophy of complementary disruption rather than replacement? The question addressed the principle that had emerged as perhaps the most significant insight from our journey. I considered how to articulate it clearly for this global audience. Disruptive innovation is often framed as replacement, new approaches completely supplanting established systems. I began, but our experience suggests a different model. The most effective innovation often occurs not through wholesale replacement, but through thoughtful integration that preserves valuable traditional elements while introducing necessary evolution. I continued, explaining how Luminary's technology platform incorporated established financial analysis principles that had proven valuable over decades while making them accessible through new delivery methods and at different price points. This wasn't diminishing their sophistication, but rather extending their reach to organizations previously excluded by cost or accessibility barriers. The complementary model created value for everyone involved, I explained. Mid-market companies gained access to previously unavailable intelligence tools. Traditional firms like Reeves Consulting maintained their core services for existing clients, while gaining referral relationships with companies that would eventually grow into their target market. And Luminary built a sustainable business serving needs that established institutions weren't structurally designed to address. This philosophy of complementary value rather than competitive replacement had implications far beyond our specific industry context. Throughout the panel discussion, leaders from various sectors shared similar observations about effective innovation in their fields, describing how the most sustainable transformations typically integrated valuable established elements rather than attempting to eliminate or circumvent them entirely. The conversation expanded to address how this complementary approach might apply to global economic development and financial inclusion. Could sophisticated financial tools traditionally reserved for wealthy nations and major corporations be appropriately adapted for emerging economies and smaller enterprises? How might such accessibility impact global economic development and reduce systemic inequalities? As these questions unfolded, I realized how significantly our journey had expanded beyond its original scope. What had begun as a personal quest to validate a different approach to financial services had evolved into a case study with broader applications for innovation, institutional evolution, and economic inclusion. Following the Davos panel, I received an invitation that further demonstrated this expanded impact. Harvard Business School requested permission to develop a case study about Luminary innovations, focusing specifically on our complementary disruption model and collaborative relationship with Reeves Consulting. The case would be taught in their MBA program as part of a course on effective innovation in established industries. The request represented validation beyond business metrics, academic recognition that our approach illustrated important principles, worthy of study by future business leaders. After consulting with my family and Luminary's executive team, I agreed to participate, providing interviews and documentation to support comprehensive case development. Throughout this process, I worked closely with Professor Elena Rodriguez, who specialized in family business transitions and disruptive innovation. Her questions penetrated beyond surface-level business strategies to explore the underlying psychological and relational dynamics that had influenced our journey. Your story challenges conventional narratives about innovation and family business succession, she observed during one interview session. The standard storyline suggests either conformity to established patterns or complete rejection and replacement. Your experience demonstrates a more nuanced middle path, separation necessary for establishing distinct identity, followed by reintegration that preserves independence while creating complementary value. Her observation captured precisely what had emerged through our journey. The initial separation had been essential for developing Luminary's distinct approach without being absorbed into the gravitational pull of the established family system. Yet the ultimate resolution hadn't been perpetual opposition, but evolved collaboration that respected both identities while creating mutual advantage. That middle path wasn't immediately apparent, I acknowledged. It emerged gradually through specific situations where collaboration created better outcomes than either continued separation or attempted integration would have produced. The practical experience preceded the philosophical understanding. This implementation before theory pattern caught Professor Rodriguez's attention. That's actually quite consistent with how genuine innovation typically occurs, she noted. Theory often follows practice rather than preceding it. We discover new approaches through addressing specific challenges, then subsequently develop frameworks to explain and extend those discoveries. The completed Harvard case study, published 18 months later, became one of their most frequently taught innovation cases. Its appeal transcended specific industry contexts to illustrate broader principles about navigating the complex territory between tradition and innovation, between established value and necessary evolution. The case's publication coincided with another significant development, the first cohort of Harold Reeves Innovation Fellows completing their 2-year program. These 5 entrepreneurs had developed financial technology innovations serving various underrepresented markets, a platform providing sophisticated cash flow management tools for minority-owned small businesses, an application simplifying complex financial documentation for immigrants navigating unfamiliar systems, a service adapting enterprise-level risk assessment tools for rural agricultural cooperatives, and 2 other equally impactful innovations. We organized a graduation symposium at Reeves Consulting headquarters, a significant location choice that symbolized how completely perspectives had evolved since my departure 6 years earlier. The event brought together leaders from traditional financial institutions, emerging fintech companies, impact investors, and media representatives to celebrate these entrepreneurs' achievements and highlight their continuing development needs. My parents participated actively in the symposium, with my father delivering opening remarks that reflected how profoundly his understanding had evolved. When my father founded Reeves Consulting 63 years ago, his innovation was recognizing that emerging professional families needed sophisticated financial guidance previously available only to established wealth, he observed. Today's innovation fellows are extending that same principle, identifying underserved markets and developing solutions appropriate to their specific needs and circumstances. The methodologies differ significantly from our traditional approach, but the fundamental spirit of innovation addressing unmet needs remains consistent. His perspective highlighted an understanding that had gradually emerged through our journey. That legacy isn't about preserving specific methodologies, but continuing the fundamental spirit of innovation and contribution that created value in the first place. This recognition liberated both traditional institutions and innovative ventures from unnecessary opposition, creating space for complementary evolution that strengthened both through thoughtful integration. The Innovation Fellows themselves represented diverse backgrounds and perspectives, many quite different from the traditional profiles of financial service entrepreneurs. Their approaches varied significantly from established methodologies, yet addressed legitimate needs that conventional systems had overlooked or inadequately served. Their innovations weren't replacing traditional financial services, but extending capabilities to previously excluded populations through adapted methodologies and technology-enabled accessibility. As I observed these entrepreneurs presenting, Their work to an audience that included both established financial leaders and emerging innovators. I reflected on how significantly industry dialogue had evolved since Luminary's founding. The conversation had shifted from binary opposition, traditional versus innovative, established versus disruptive, toward recognition of potential complementary value across the spectrum of approaches. This evolution wasn't universal or complete. Segments of both traditional institutions and disruptive startups still position themselves in opposition to each other, framing the relationship as inherently competitive rather than potentially collaborative. Yet the conversation had expanded enough to create space for middle-path approaches that recognized value across different methodologies, rather than advocating wholesale replacement of established systems. Following the symposium, my mother approached me with an unexpected suggestion. "I've been thinking about how to further extend the impact of what we've learned through our journey," she began. "Harvard's case study will influence future business leaders, and the Innovation Fellowship will support emerging entrepreneurs. But there might be another dimension worth addressing." She continued thoughtfully. "Many family businesses struggle with succession challenges, particularly when potential successors have different visions or approaches than established leadership. The binary options typically considered, maintain tradition exactly or leave entirely, often result in either suppressed innovation or lost legacy. Our experience suggests a different possibility that might benefit these families." Her observation demonstrated remarkable evolution from her previous perspective. The woman who had once insisted on strict adherence to established methodologies now recognized value in diverse approaches and the potential complementary strength they could create when properly channeled. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.